Sherri's going to show us how you make the blocks in release 9 of the Bloom-Topia Quilt Along. Let's get started.
Okay, we're ready to get started on release 9. We're going to start with the evening star block, and today we will also be making the Dragonfly Block. To make the flying geese units, you are going to use background rectangles and print squares. Start by placing a gray print square right sides together with a white background rectangle. Draw a diagonal line, sew on that line, press and trim the remaining leftover fabric there. It'll look like this before you trim it. Then you're going to take an aqua square and repeat the same thing on that other side. And we will also press and trim, and we are going to make 10 of these blocks. And we're going to do the same thing with 2 different fabrics. We're going to start with the orange fabric and the white background rectangles. We're going to add the green square to the other side. The same thing, you're going to draw the diagonal line, sew on the line, press and trim, and we're also going to make 10 of these. So you'll have 2 different flying geese blocks, 10 of this color combination and 10 of this color combination. To put together the evening star block, you will need a center background square, 4 corner background squares, and 4 flying geese units, 2 from each colorway that we made. And you're going to sew each row together and then sew the rows together to make the block. And you will need to make 5 of the evening star blocks. Using 2 of the evening star blocks, you will sew them together to make 1 unit. Now remember, we made 5 of these. Save the other 3, we're going to be using them soon. Now we're ready to start the Dragonfly block. You're going to start out with strips of your background fabric and of each of 3 different prints. And from those strips, you're going to use the 5.5-inch line on the Starburst ruler by Creative Grids, and we're going to cut wedges like this. Now from your background fabric, you will need 18 different wedges, and from the print fabrics, you'll need 3 wedges from each of the 3 different fabrics. Once we get all the wedges cut out, it's time to start putting them together. Before we start putting these together, let me let you know that if you don't have the Starburst ruler, there is a template included with your pattern. Okay, you're going to begin by taking a print and a white wedge, and we're going to put them right sides together, and we're going to sew a 1/4-inch seam. One trick that I found that makes this really helpful is that you want to start sewing down at the small edge of the wedge. That's because we're actually going to be cutting off this outer edge later, and so it doesn't matter as much as if it's lined up. What really matters to keep your points sharp is that the bottom narrow edges are lined up as well as you can get them. And I like to press the seams open before moving on to sew the 3rd wedge. So it just also helps that point stay really sharp. So then you're going to add that 3rd wedge. You've pressed the seam open, then you add that 3rd wedge, and I also press that seam open. Make 2 wedges with a print, background, and print from each of the 3 prints. Next, we're going to use the exact same technique, and we're going to make wedges that go background, print, background, so the opposite of the wedges that we made before. And we're also going to make 2 wedges like this from each of 3 prints. Next, we're going to use a 3.5-inch by 3.5-inch square ruler to trim all the wedge sections that we've made. And you'll want to line up with the corners, the 3.5-inch square, and you should be able to get these sides really straight. And we're going to trim along both of these edges. That's what I mentioned earlier. We're just going to be trimming away this fabric, and it's going to give us a unit like this. So after it's been trimmed, and we're going to do the same thing with the other wedge group. So you will end up with 2 of these from each of the 3 fabrics and 2 of these from each of the 3 fabrics. Next, we are going to add the small squares, some of them print squares and some of them background squares, to the units that we've just trimmed. And what you'll do is take a small print square, put it on the corner of the unit, right sides together. We're going to draw a diagonal line, stitch on that line, as I've shown here. Then we're going to press and trim, and you'll make 2 of these units from each of 3 colorways. We're going to do the same thing with the units that have the background triangles on the outer edges. We'll place a background square, right sides together, draw and sew the diagonal line, trim and press, and make 2 units with this combination and color placement from each of the 3 fabrics. Okay, now we're ready to put those units together that we've just made. So you'll put the units with the print fabrics around the outside opposite from each other, and the units with the background fabric on the outside opposite each other. We'll sew them together into rows, and then we will sew the rows together to make the block. Now, one thing about this is that you will probably want to pin just to make sure that these points stay matched up. And I just like to, when I put them right sides together, push the pin through so that it comes out at the point, and then also put it through that point. And I just keep them lined up with those pins so that it'll work out. Now you're going to make 1 of these blocks from each of the 3 print fabrics so that you'll have 3 dragonfly blocks. Okay, now we're going to take our 3 evening star units that we set aside earlier and our 3 dragonfly block units, and we're going to put them together. So we're going to sew them together in pairs and then sew each pair together to make 1 unit. And this is such a fun block. It was so much fun to put it together. This is our completed dragonfly block. Hope you've enjoyed making this block. Be sure to come back in 2 weeks for release 10.